So many moons ago, when I first started homeschooling, my oldest was in first grade, and I have this memory of standing in the kitchen, staring at a stack of all these workbooks and curriculum choices that I'd laid out for my kiddo. And I really thought I was doing something brilliant. I thought he gets to choose what he works on first today. And I felt like this was like revolutionary parenting. He got freedom, autonomy, all the things that he really loves. He loves independence. And he stared at the stack for what felt like an eternity. It was probably just a couple of minutes. And he looked at me and was like, I don't know. And I realized much later that I had handed him a decision that he didn't have the tools to make yet. He didn't know which subject he most was ready to engage with. He didn't know what choosing first was supposed to feel like or what it meant. I had given him freedom in kind of a vacuum, and instead of feeling empowered, he just felt stuck and uncertain. And so I remember saying, like, I don't remember what subject it was, but I just kind of was like, okay, forget it. I chose the subject for him. And I think we both felt a little defeated. I was trying to give him choices because I thought that that would unlock independence and curiosity in him. But this has stuck with me for a long time because I believe in choice. I believed in it then and I still believe in it now. I just wasn't doing it right. Welcome to Continuing Education, a podcast for homeschooling families with actually useful information. I'm Heidi, and this is a show where we're going to take what actually works in education research and translate it into something you can use at your kitchen table, or your couch, or your car, or wherever school happens to be for you. Today, we're talking about structured choice, what it is, why it works, and how to use it without losing your mind or your lesson plan. So let's start with what structured choice actually is, because it sounds simple and it feels kind of obvious, but there's actually a really strategy underneath it that can change things for you if this is something that you haven't implemented or tried before. So structured choice is when you give your kiddo real, meaningful options, but those options exist within a framework that you've already designed. So the parameters are yours. The choice inside those parameters belongs to them. And here's a really easy way to picture it. So let's say your kiddo needs to write this week. With no structure, write something is a little overwhelming. There are infinite directions, and a blank page can be paralyzing for anyone, let alone a kiddo who doesn't want to write. With 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 over control, you might hand them a prompt, a format, a word count, a due date, and they comply, but they're not particularly invested. With structured choice, you might say you're writing something this week. It can be a personal essay, a short story, or a how-to guide on something you care about. Pick one by Thursday and we'll talk about your idea. That outcome, the piece of writing, is fixed. They're going to write this week. The path to it, though, is theirs. And that's kind of the whole thing. You design the container, but they get to move around inside it. This approach has roots in what researchers call self-determination theory. It's a framework that was developed by some psychologists who spent decades studying what actually motivates human beings to do hard things. Their core finding is that people, including kids, have three basic psychological needs that have to be met for genuine engagement. And those three things are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Autonomy means having a sense of control over your actions. Competence means you feel capable of what you're being asked to do, while relatedness means feeling connected to the people around you. So structured choice directly addresses autonomy. Here's the part that I think that parents sometimes get tripped up about, though, is that autonomy doesn't mean unlimited freedom, but it does mean meaningful agency. And there's a big difference in that, right? Unlimited options can undermine your kid's sense of competence because they can start to feel like they're not capable, that they can't even get started, or they don't even know how to choose. And that's what happened at my kitchen table many moons ago with the stack of curriculum that I thought I was offering to my child. There's a big distinction there. And along those lines, this is something that I think we well-meaning homeschool parents do. We think that more freedom equals more respect for our kids, but actually choice that's too open can feel more like being abandoned than being trusted. Kids need to know that you have thought about the options, that you have already done some of the narrowing, and then the choice they make inside that frame actually means something and is safe. So structured choice isn't, just a relaxed, unschooling adjacent strategy, though it can be used in more of a relaxed homeschool. Instead, it's more of a deliberate instructional decision that you're making. You're doing the thinking about the boundaries so that your kid can do the thinking inside of them. So as I was reading about like this concept of structured choice and trying to find some research around it, I did find a study. In 2008, there were three researchers at Duke University, and they published a meta-analysis in Psychological Bulletin, meaning they had gathered and analyzed 41 separate studies on the effects of choice. And what they found was really interesting. They found that providing choice enhanced intrinsic motivation, effort, task performance, and perceived competence. So it wasn't just motivation, it was performance. Kids who were given choices actually did better, not just because the content was easier, but because they cared more about it. And I thought that was really interesting. And I thought that that matters a lot because effort and care are probably the two things we're trying to cultivate most in our homeschool kiddos. I don't know, all the details, but when a kid chooses something, even when it's something small, they have a different relationship with it. It really becomes theirs. That research also showed that this nuance, that structured choice, was different than letting kids just do whatever they want. They found that providing students autonomy in homework assignments led to increased self-efficacy as well as better learning outcomes. But the key word there is autonomy, not chaos, right? Not, craziness. Autonomy is in that study meant bounded, intentional options within a task that still had a goal. Then if you pair that with what another psychologist, his name is Barry Schwartz, has been arguing for years, his work on what he calls the paradox of choice shows up on the flip side of that coin. The concept of the paradox of choice argues that an abundance of choices can lead to increased anxiety, decision paralysis, and overall dissatisfaction. His argument is that while we tend to believe more options equal more freedom, having too many choices requires more cognitive effort, leading to decision fatigue and increased regret over our choices. And when I read that, I thought, oh my gosh, yes, that is exactly what happened in my kitchen when I was offering my kiddo curriculum and which one to start with. I gave him too many choices with too little structure. And instead of feeling free, he felt paralyzed. And I think we may have all experienced this at some time. When you go on Halloween, when kids go trick-or-treating, you have some kids where you're letting them choose their own candy. You have some kids that choose a candy right away. And then you have some kids who literally will sit there and for several minutes identifying their choices. In that moment, they're feeling paralyzed. I feel like I see this. Once I identified what this was, I saw it over and over again in my kids and other people's kids. So the research here kind of gives us both halves of the equation. Choice is genuinely good for learning, but too much choice is genuinely bad for it. So the sweet spot is what some researchers call the optimal choice. It's a small, meaningful set of options that all lead to worthwhile outcome. 2 to 4 choices seems to be kind of like a sweet spot in the research. Not 1, that's not really a choice. Not 10, because that's going to be overwhelming. 2 to 4, where every option is genuinely viable and the child can see themselves doing any of them. There's also something really important about what happens to the parent-child relationship when structured choice is used consistently. Research from that self-determination theory that I mentioned before shows that an autonomy supportive instructional style is associated with students acquiring knowledge in a reflexive manner and also increases student participation, self-confidence, self-esteem, commitment, initiative, and enthusiasm for learning. All the things that I want. I want my kiddo to be enthusiastic about their own learning. That didn't feel like abstract to me. That really felt like, oh, that's my kid actually liking learning, and that's the whole goal. When I first started reading some of this research, when I wanted to talk about this topic, and so I kind of dove in to try to find some research that kind of supported what I was thinking, or I felt a little validated, but also a little convicted because I'd always believed in giving my kids choices, but I also learned that in some ways I've done it poorly. I haven't done it the best way. Giving choices well is its own skill. It takes thought, it takes some upfront planning, But once you understand the framework, it can become relatively intuitive really quickly. So now let's get into some of the actual how to. So there are some things that I've kind of naturally done over the years to offer my kids choice, but then I also pulled from some of the research that I found as to what might be helpful. And I've come up with 5 techniques that I want to walk you through. Some of these might be things that you're already doing and you just haven't named it. I found that to be the case for myself. Others might require kind of a small shift in how you set up your day. So the first is called 2-path choice, and this is the simplest version, the best place to start if your kid tends to be overwhelmed or if you're new to building choice into your homeschool. You give them exactly 2 ways to complete the same objective. Not 2 different objectives, the same objective, just 2 different paths. So for example, if your kid needs to demonstrate understanding of the water cycle, option A, they can draw and label a diagram explaining the steps. Or option B, they can write a short paragraph that walks through the process in their own words. The same learning goal is demonstrating understanding of the water goal. You're just giving them 2 different ways to do that. One appeals to visual spatial learners, while the other really appeals to kids who process through language. Or if your kid is an audio person, right? Maybe they explain it to you verbally. There are different ways. You find the outputs that make sense based on your kid. The goal really is that the choice respects the learner and the goal keeps everyone on track. The thing not to do here is don't make one option obviously easier than the other. Kids can notice this and they'll pick the easier one not because it suits them, but because it's less work. And then you've accidentally trained them to choose comfort over a challenge. So try to make both options genuinely equivalent in terms of rigor. The second technique is called time of day autonomy. This is also one of the easiest wins in a homeschool, and it costs you almost nothing. Instead of dictating the order of the school day, you can give your kid control over the sequences of subjects within a defined window. So you determine what has to get done by lunch. They determine when each thing happens. I actually do this myself where I have a checklist and they can choose their subjects in any order. And the only thing that I put on the checklist are the things that they have to do, like appointments or classes that we have to go to that are scheduled. And then they can do their schoolwork anytime between 9 and 3 in any order. Here's so that's it. You've kind of determined what's fixed, but the win is theirs. And I can tell you that when they start to kind of when kids change from being resistant learners to learning they have some autonomy, you can kind of sense the energy in the school day has changed because then they start to get motivated a little bit earlier. They know that, oh, if I get through all of my checklists before lunch, I can go play. Or if I'm not really feeling math today, I can save that for the end. Or if I'm not really feeling math today, maybe I do it first to get it over with. So when they get to decide that they want to save their favorite subject for last as a reward or knock out the hard thing so it's not hanging over them, they're already doing some of that executive function work that kids need to build over time. They're kind of planning, they're self-regulating, all before they've even opened a single book, and that's really meaningful. The third technique is called choice of demonstration. This one comes from some instruction research, and it can be really powerful for mixed-aged homeschools. So I know a lot of us are managing kids in different grades, different ages. The idea is that the content, what you're learning, is fixed, but the product, how they show you they've learned it, can vary. So, for example, if you're setting a historical event, one kid might write a journal entry from a participant's perspective, while another might build a timeline. Another might narrate what happened to you over breakfast because maybe they're not writing yet. All 3 of them have learned the same material. All 3 demonstrate it in a way that matches how their brain works and their level of education and experience so far. There's a common mistake here, though, which is giving options that only favor one type of learner in practice. If all your choices are written products, you haven't really given choices. So you want to give them in a variety of format without respecting the actual range of how kids think and process. The fourth technique is called expertise option. AI and I came up with that name. This one is especially good for motivated or curious kiddos who want to go deep on topics. So once in a while, you open a small window where they can propose something like, we're studying ecosystems this month. You can follow our regular materials. If there's a specific aspect of ecosystems you want to go deep on, bring me a 1-sentence pitch by Monday and we'll figure out how to make it fit. You're not really saying like anything goes. You're saying within this unit, within this ecosystems, there is a door and here's how you get through it. Most kids won't use it every time, but knowing that the door exists where they know that they have the option to really go deep on something, if something has bigger curiosity or they know that like it's okay to spend time doing that, that can change their relationship to the material because they start looking for what interests them because there's now somewhere for that interest to go. This one can take some letting go. The first time that a kid comes to you with something unexpected, your instinct might want to redirect them to what you consider the real content or something that you find interest in. Just resist that. Their interest is their real content. The last technique is structured choice over time. And this is a slightly bigger picture version, and it's about pacing. So instead of giving choice within a single assignment, in this version, you give your kids some control over the schedule of content within a unit. So here's an example. You could have 4 books that you're reading this semester, and they can choose the order that you read them. Or maybe you're covering 6 topics in your history block, and you give them the full list and you ask what they want to start with. You've kind of already curated the list. They get to sequence it. It's kind of the same concept as what we talked about in terms of like completing their tasks within a certain time frame during the day. But it's kind of over the course of a semester or a unit, some kind of larger length of time. And what you'll notice is that kids who get to sequence their learning, they start to think about why certain things might go before or after others. And then they start making connections before you even taught the material. So they might say, hey, this might make sense to go in sequentially, or I want to learn about this topic before I learn about this topic. And you're kind of building their natural rhythm of learning so that they can do this themselves when it is time for them to engage in material independently. One thing to watch for here, though, is decision fatigue. We kind of mentioned that before. It is real, including for kids. So don't layer structured choice into every single moment of the day. Pick 1 or 2 places where choice lives consistently and keep the rest of the day predictable. For some kids who have anxiety or they struggle, that structure can really be important. Predictability and choice, they're not opposites. They work together, really. The predictable parts of the day make the choice points feel really special and meaningful rather than just feeling exhausting. So just to kind of sum up, structured choice requires you to do some more upfront thinking. It can be something a little bit more to planned. And I want to say that clearly because I've seen some advice that frames this as a way of how to hand things off to your kids and step back. And I don't think that that's what this is. You're designing the options still. You're making sure that every option is genuinely worthwhile. This can be a little bit more work. You're maintaining the expectations, even if you're kind of releasing the path. And that takes planning. And when you're in a busy season or an exhausted season, or we've been in the car for 2 weeks because we've been visiting family and the school routine is completely blown season, it can feel like a lot. So what I've learned is you don't have to build structured choice into everything all the time. You build into the things that matter most. If your kid is resistant about writing, that's where you put the choice architecture because, if they're dragging their feet on it, you want to give them some power. You don't have to overhaul your entire approach. You can find the friction points and then add a little agency there to kind of make it a little bit easier. The other thing that I think I want to name, just because I've heard this talked about in some homeschool circles, is guilt can come up when we don't give our kids enough choice. Clearly, if you've been running a pretty teacher-directed homeschool thus far, and now you're reading all this research or hearing this, you might be wondering if you've been doing it wrong. You haven't. Structure is not the enemy of autonomy. Predictable, consistent, loving structure is actually the container that makes meaningful choice possible. So all you've done is you've created that container early and you're able to move into structured choice if that's something you want to implement. The truth is your kid doesn't need infinite freedom. They need a parent who has thought carefully about what the options are and then trust them enough to choose between them. And that's it. That's the whole thing. So if you've already been doing some version of this without knowing the name for it, good, keep going. That's awesome. I love it. If there's one thing I want you to walk away with, it's this. Choice is a tool, not a philosophy. You get to decide where it lives in your homeschool, how much of it you want to use, how structured it is. The research is clear that it makes a real difference in motivation and learning, but only when it's designed well, and you are the one who gets to be thoughtful about how to implement. You're the designer. Your kid gets to move inside what you build. That's a partnership between you and your kiddo. Show notes for this episode have all the research I mentioned today, so if you're interested in wanting to learn a little bit more about that, you can find that on homeschoolce.substack.com, plus some additional reading if you want to go deeper. You can find them on the website. I'm Heidi. Thanks for spending time learning with me today. See you next time.